Aldrich Hazen Ames was born into the world of intelligence. His father, Carlton Cecil Ames, was a CIA analyst. The family lived a seemingly ordinary suburban life in McLean, Virginia. McLean, a town pretty much synonymous with the agency, young Rick as he was known, did not appear destined for a life of infamy. He was an average student, often described as aloof, a bit intellectually arrogant according to peers, yet he showed little discipline or ambition. His childhood was colored by the Cold War. That silent, pervasive conflict shaped the community and the dinner table conversations in his home. He absorbed the culture of the CIA through osmosis. His early adulthood was a study in aimlessness. Ames attended the University of Chicago, but dropped out after a couple of years. He returned to Washington and drifted through low-level jobs. Despite his personal shortcomings, Aldrich Ames slowly advanced within the CIA's Directorate of Operations. His first overseas posting was to Ankara, Turkey, a critical listening post on the edge of the Soviet Union. His primary mission was to recruit Soviet officials as spies for the United States. By all accounts, his performance was mediocre. He struggled to make recruitments. His operational skills were deemed average at best. His supervisors noted his drinking, his tendency to procrastinate. Yet he was a part of the system, a company man. The system tended to protect its own. He was posted to New York City. There he handled several Soviet assets. In 1981 he was sent to Mexico City. It was here the patterns of his future betrayal began to solidify. His drinking worsened. In Mexico City he met Maria del Rosario Casas Dupuy. Her expensive tastes would become a powerful motivator for treason. In 1983 Ames returned to Langley, Virginia. The decision to commit treason was not a sudden impulse for Aldrich Ames. It was the culmination of years of professional frustration. By the spring of 1985, Ames was drowning in debt. The divorce from Nancy Segabarth had left him with significant financial obligations. His lifestyle with Rosario Casas was becoming increasingly expensive. He saw no legitimate way out of his predicament. His CIA salary was fixed. His career had plateaued. He felt a deep sense of entitlement. He believed his intellectual superiority wasn't being rewarded by the agency. Arrogance, resentment, greed, those traits created the perfect conditions for betrayal. His rationale was shockingly simple. He needed money. He convinced himself he could manage a limited one-time transaction with the Soviets. He planned to offer relatively harmless information, just enough to secure a payment that would solve his immediate crisis. It was a staggering miscalculation. He saw it as a business transaction, a simple solution to a simple problem. The Soviets did not make Ames wait long. On June 13, 1985, he met Sergei Chavakin, a Soviet arms control specialist. Chavakin was a KGB intelligence officer. During a walk through Washington, D.C., Chavakin confirmed KGB interest. He gave Ames a subtle signal. The deal was on. For Ames, this was the moment of truth. He had initiated contact, now the enemy responded. He went into his CIA office and gathered materials. He methodically compiled the agency's top assets in the USSR. He stuffed classified documents into a plastic bag. He walked out of the building, unchecked. Security was lax in the 1980s, no routine bag checks. He took the papers home and prepared a report for Moscow. He identified more than a dozen top CIA sources, high-ranking contacts in the KGB, high-ranking contacts in Soviet military intelligence. They were the crown jewels of US intelligence. The initial payment came via dead drop. There was no going back. The information Aldrich Ames provided to the KGB had an immediate and honestly devastating impact. The Soviets began to roll up the CIA's entire agent network inside their country with ruthless efficiency. One by one, the assets Ames had identified were arrested. These were not low-level informants. They were high-ranking officers who had risked their lives to provide critical intelligence to the United States. Major General Dmitry Polyakov, Adolf Tolkachev were suddenly silenced. The CIA's line of communication to them just went dead. The damage was catastrophic. The CIA was effectively blinded. For years the agency had relied on these human sources to understand Soviet military capabilities, political intentions, and technological developments. Now that window was slammed shut. The human cost of his betrayal was horrific. At least 10 of the agents he exposed were executed. They were arrested, interrogated by the KGB, and shot in the back of the head in the basement of Moscow's Lefortovo prison. By 1986, it was undeniable that the CIA had a catastrophic problem. The sheer number of compromised operations and lost assets could not be explained by bad luck or isolated security breaches. So, a special team was formed within the CIA to find the source of the leaks. This was the beginning of what became known as the mole hunt, a long and frustrating investigation that would, honestly, consume the agency for years. The investigators, a small and highly secretive group of counterintelligence officers, began by examining every possible cause. Compromised communication systems, code-breaking by the Soviets' possibility of a mole in a friendly foreign intelligence service. But, the one possibility they were slow to accept was that the traitor was one of their own. Aldrich Ames was, for a time, actually part of the team tasked with finding the mole. This gave him an extraordinary advantage. He could monitor the investigation's progress, or lack thereof, from the inside. He saw the files, heard the theories, and knew exactly who was being scrutinized. This allowed him to deflect suspicion away from himself, and make sure the investigators were, chasing dead ends. He would suggest that the losses were due to a former CIA officer, Edward Lee Howard, who had defected to the Soviet Union. When the FBI took over the case, they approached it with a whole new rigor. They assembled a small, dedicated team of agents and analysts. They methodically reviewed the files of every CIA officer with access to the compromised information. They created a matrix of access opportunity motive. Slowly, the suspect list shrank. One name rose to the top: Aldrich Ames. His access was perfect, at the center of the SE division. His alcoholism and professional mediocrity suggested resentment, but the biggest red flag was his inexplicable wealth. The FBI probed his finances. They obtained bank records, credit card statements, loan applications. They found huge structured cash deposits. Often shortly after meetings with Soviet handlers, millions flowed into his accounts. They tracked purchases, house, luxury car, extravagant spending. The financial trail was a smoking gun. The arrest was planned for Monday, February 21, 1994. The FBI wanted to apprehend Ames before he could fly to Moscow for a scheduled meeting, where they feared he might defect permanently. On that morning, as Ames left his expensive Arlington home to drive to work, his path was blocked by FBI vehicles. Agents swarmed his Jaguar. They pulled him from the car. They placed him under arrest. The man who had operated for 9 years as the KGB's most valuable mole was captured without a struggle. His life of deception was over. Simultaneously, another team of agents arrived at the house to arrest his wife Rosario for her role in the conspiracy. Taken to FBI headquarters for interrogation, Ames was initially defiant. He asked for a lawyer and refused to talk. The government's case against him was overwhelming. The FBI presented bank records showing millions in Russian payments. They showed surveillance logs. They produced incriminating documents from his home computer. They produced incriminating documents from his trash. They warned that Rosario faced a long prison sentence. The prospect of his wife's incarceration and the weight of the evidence broke his resolve. Ames agreed to cooperate. In lengthy debriefings, he confessed to everything. In exchange for full cooperation, he was sentenced to life without parole. The capture of Aldrich Ames sent shockwaves through the American intelligence community. It was a moment of profound institutional humiliation for the CIA. For 9 years, a traitor had operated from within the very heart of its Soviet operations, and the agency had failed to detect him. The case exposed deep-seated cultural problems: a reluctance to investigate its own officers' poor internal security, a shocking lack of attention to the personal and financial conduct of its employees. In the aftermath, CIA Director James Woolsey conceded that counterintelligence had failed spectacularly. The scandal led to internal purges, policy changes, and a long, painful period of soul-searching at Langley. The legacy of Ames's betrayal is measured in lost lives and compromised national security. The execution of at least 10 of America's most valuable Soviet assets was a devastating blow. Today, Aldrich Ames is serving a life sentence at the high-security federal penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. He will spend the rest of his days behind bars, a forgotten relic of a bygone era. His story remains a powerful cautionary tale in the world of espionage. It is a permanent reminder that the greatest threat to an intelligence agency can often come from within. His legacy is ruin and betrayal, a permanent stain on CIA history, and a stark warning: the enemy within is ever present.